Step down or face consequences. That was the chilling message sent to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not from France, not from the United States, but from ECOWAS, the so-called Brotherhood of West African Nations, a coalition that once claimed to stand for unity, peace, and African progress, now threatening one of the only African leaders actually delivering real change. Why? Because Traoré did the unthinkable. He kicked out foreign troops. He refused IMF loans. He exposed the lie of democracy without sovereignty. And he inspired millions to believe that Africa doesn't need permission to rise. And for that, they want him gone. ECOWAS officials called his rise a threat to regional stability. They said Burkina Faso must return to constitutional order. But Traoré asked a simple question. Whose constitution? The one written by elites in air-conditioned offices, or the one being rewritten by the people in the fields, the clinics, the schools, with their own hands? You see, this was never about democracy. It was about control. And ECOWAS? For years, many say it's become less of a union and more of a Western enforcement arm in African clothing. Where were they when Burkina Faso was flooded with terrorism? Where were they when foreign corporations stole gold and left behind hunger? Where were they when children died in silence, waiting for promises that never came? But now that Traoré is building roads, clinics, and dignity, now they speak. Now they threaten. Now they demand. Behind closed doors, the pressure is brutal. Multiple sources say ECOWAS leaders, under French and American influence, gave Traoré an ultimatum: step down peacefully, or be removed by force. And if he doesn't, economic sanctions, border closures, military isolation, even assassination, whispered but very real. Because his example is dangerous. If Burkina Faso succeeds, what's stopping Mali, Niger, Guinea, Chad from following? What happens when Africa stops asking and starts acting? That's what terrifies the old system. And they know the clock is ticking. So they push, hard. But Traoré, he doesn't flinch. He said, "We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." And his people? They're standing with him. Villagers have taken up arms, not for war, but to protect their fields, their families, their future. Youth groups have vowed to resist any foreign-backed intervention. Even some ECOWAS citizens are rising up, asking, who do you really work for? Because today, everyone sees the truth. This isn't just a fight for Burkina Faso. It's a fight for the soul of Africa. And in that fight, Ibrahim Traoré has chosen his side. And as the pressure from ECOWAS grows, so does the resistance from the people. Traoré may be young, but he understands something the old guard doesn't. This is not the 1960s. You can't just assassinate a leader and expect the people to stay silent. You can't shut borders and expect a revolution to die. Because this time, the revolution lives in the minds, not just in the man. Across Burkina Faso, cities are buzzing with quiet preparation. Farmers are stockpiling food. Students are organizing networks of communication. Local militias, once scattered, are now unified under one cause: protect the revolution. Traoré has become more than a president. To millions, he is the proof that Africa can rise on its own terms, and that's why the establishment is panicking. Because if Traoré survives this, ECOWAS loses credibility, France loses leverage, the IMF loses another client, and colonialism, even in its modern form, suffers a fatal blow. This is why they want him dead. Not because he's violent, not because he's corrupt, but because he's free. And he's teaching others to be free too. But Traoré is no fool. He knows the system he's defying has teeth. So he's doing two things at once: fortifying Burkina Faso's defense and economy from external attack, and quietly building a Pan-African alliance that includes Mali, Niger, Guinea, and more. Together, they're forming what insiders call the New Bloc, an alliance based not on aid or elections, but on dignity, sovereignty, and survival. A united front against imposed sanctions, puppet regimes, and external military intervention. And this is ECOWAS's worst nightmare. Because if the new bloc holds, the old Africa dies, and a new one rises, one that cannot be bullied, bribed, or broken. So now the world watches. Will ECOWAS cross the line? Will the West pull the trigger from behind the curtain? Or will the people rise faster than the system can crush them? One thing is clear. If Ibrahim Traoré falls, it won't be quietly. And if he survives, he might just become the most important African leader of the 21st century. The days grow tense, the threats grow louder. But inside Burkina Faso, something unexpected is happening. Fear is fading, and in its place, conviction is rising. In the capital, thousands gather every Friday, not in protest, but in unity, holding signs that say, "We are Traoré, hands off Burkina Faso. ECOWAS is not our voice." Even school children now learn the word sovereignty before they learn globalization, because Traoré has turned a political battle into a generational awakening, and he's not just talking to Africans anymore. He's speaking to the global South, to Latin Americans tired of debt traps, to Southeast Asians exhausted by foreign interference, to every nation that has been treated like a colony long after independence. His message is clear. We will not be managed. We will not be lectured. We are not beggars. We are builders, and we are not afraid. Back inside ECOWAS, the pressure is splitting the bloc in two. Some nations, under heavy Western influence, continue to push for sanctions and intervention options, but others, quietly backing away. Behind closed doors, countries like Guinea and Mali are warning, if you strike Traoré, you'll start a war you can't control. And maybe that's the biggest fear now. Not just that Traoré will survive, but that he will win. That he will show Africa and the world that you don't need permission to lead. That a man with no foreign support, no elite training, no billionaire backers, can still rewrite history, brick by brick, clinic by clinic, field by field. And in that rewriting, the old order begins to crumble. So now, ECOWAS faces a choice. Obey the same foreign hands that pull their strings, or step back and let Africa breathe. Because if they move against Traoré, one thing is certain. The people will not forget. Not in Burkina Faso, not in Niger, not in history. And just when it seemed like the pressure couldn't get any heavier, a leaked memo shook the continent. An internal ECOWAS document, marked confidential, revealed discussions of a potential military intervention plan in Burkina Faso. The memo included strategic entry points, possible alliances with friendly forces, and chillingly, contingencies in the event of Ibrahim Traoré's removal. The document exploded across African social media. People were outraged, because this wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was war planning, against their own. Traoré, in his first public response, didn't rant. He didn't shout. He simply stood before his people and said, "We are not afraid of death, but we will never kneel again." That line became a banner, a tattoo, a chant in markets, in mosques, on university walls. And then something no one expected happened. Soldiers in Mali and Niger began pledging loyalty, not to ECOWAS, but to the idea of African sovereignty. One commander in Bamako said, "If they touch Burkina Faso, they touch us all." The threat of an attack on Traoré had accidentally united a continent. Meanwhile, international media tried to twist the narrative. They said Traoré was causing division, that he was pushing anti-Western extremism, that he was turning Burkina Faso into a rogue state. But the people saw through it. Because they saw their clinics being built, their fields being harvested, their dignity being restored. So who was really rogue? The man healing his nation, or the coalition planning his removal? Traoré stood firm. He warned ECOWAS, "If you cross this line, you don't just fight us, you fight the future of an independent Africa." And he meant it, because this wasn't about one man, it was about a message, that Africans will never again be punished for choosing freedom. And if ECOWAS dares to try, they may learn the hard way that Ibrahim Traoré isn't the weak link in Africa's chain. He's the spark that breaks it. As ECOWAS scrambled to contain the backlash, something even more powerful began to unfold. A movement far beyond politics, beyond borders, beyond fear. Artists began painting Traoré's image on walls from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Poets wrote verses titled, "The Man Who Said No." Musicians released songs, not in his praise, but in the spirit of his message. Africa for Africans. No masters, no middlemen. And for the first time in decades, a question echoed through the heart of the continent. If one nation can resist, why can't we all? That question is ECOWAS's nightmare, because it's no longer about Burkina Faso. It's about the idea that colonization never ended. It simply changed uniforms, from redcoats to business suits, from tanks to trade deals, from armies to NGOs, from puppets to presidents. And Traoré? He didn't just say it, he exposed it. He showed the contracts, he named the companies, he broke the silence that generations of leaders feared to touch. So now, the only weapon left against him is chaos. Insider reports suggest that sabotage plots are in motion to collapse Burkina Faso's currency, to instigate tribal conflict, to launch false flag terror attacks, blamed on local militias. But Traoré is ready. He set up independent intelligence cells trained to detect foreign interference. He's empowered village leaders to act as guardians of truth. And most of all, he's trained the people to recognize psychological warfare. They know the game now, so when disinformation spreads, the people don't panic. They organize, they record, they share, they protect. And that is power, real power, because it means Traoré has done something greater than ruling a country. He's awakened a population, and once the people are awake, the system can no longer pretend to serve them. So whether ECOWAS attacks tomorrow, or sanctions next week, or tries to assassinate with a drone dressed as diplomacy, they will face not just one captain. They will face a continent that remembers what it lost, remembers what it's owed, remembers the man who finally said, "No more."